Oh.
Okay, great. All right, well, hi everyone, thanks for joining. Welcome to our Wildfires and Climate Change event. My name is Bridget Bottinelli, and I'm here with Climate and Energy. Stu Green is also here. And today we have Katie Gibble, who's presenting from Fire Adapted Communities about preparing your household for wildfire season. And Katie, if you could share your screen. Great. Okay, and go to the next slide.
Oh, geez. Give me 1 second. Of course, now that everything's like floating around everything now. Let's see. Dang it, I had it all figured out. Just give me 1 second here.
No problem.
Let's do speaker view. Okay. Share that screen. Why is it doing that? I'm so sorry. Give me 1 second. It's thinking real hard. Oh God, don't look at my, I'm so sorry.
We can't see your screen yet, so you're
Oh,
good.
perfect. It was showing my desktop, which has way too many icons on it right now. So, okay, great. Okay, sorry about that. Now you should be seeing it.
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay, and can you go to the next slide?
Alrighty.
Okay, great. So just a few things before we get started. As you can see, is the agenda today. We have a brief introduction, followed by the wildfire presentation, and then we'll have a lot of time for questions and discussion after. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll address them all during the Q&A time. And also as a note, we are recording this presentation to put on the city's YouTube channel for people to watch later. And with that, I'll get started. You go to the next slide. So this event is the first of the Adapt Your Home campaign that Ashland Climate and Energy Programs is hosting. And each month is focused on a different topic. So this month is Prepare. So as you can see, over the next 3 months, we'll be having more events on different topics. Then you can register for those through the city calendar, however you registered for this one. And in conjunction with the campaign, we also launched a new website and Facebook page where you can find more information about how to take action and sign up for those events. So the premise of the campaign is focused on taking residential climate action. Most of Ashland's greenhouse gas emissions come from the residential sector, so this campaign is really focused on taking action at home and in our daily lives to reduce those emissions. And the campaign also supports Ashland's Climate and Energy Action Plan. And if you would like to read more about that or the goals of that, you can find that on our website as well. So definitely go check out the pages. They're all new and a lot of information you can find there. So next slide. So like I said, our first month is focused on emergency preparedness, because that's a big part of taking climate action involves preparing for the effects of climate change. And Ashland's going to continue to face an increase in extreme weather events, which is going to impact our public health, safety, general quality of life, and so on. So today we're specifically focusing on wildfire impact. And as you can see with our changing climate, we're going to have more extreme days of extreme heat and less snowpack, which affects our natural resources and increases our fire risk. And with these impacts, it's important to be ready for anything at any moment. And by being prepared, we can take action on things that we can control and hopefully put our loved ones in a safer position when an emergency does hit. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie to speak more about wildfires and how you can prepare your household.
Awesome, thanks, Bridget. So for those of you who don't know me, which I feel like everyone on this call I've either spoken to or met before. So hello, everyone. I'm Katie Gibble. I'm the Fire Adapted Communities Coordinator for the city of Ashland. I've been in this position for a little over 1.5 years, but have about 7 years of past experience in the world of wildfire preparedness and mitigation here in Oregon, as well as in the rangelands of Utah, and even before that in the forests and rangelands of Idaho. So I'm really happy to be here speaking with you all today. So I focus more on what to do around your home, but to kick things off a little bit, we are living in a climate that is changing, and with those changes in climate comes the need to adapt to changing wildfire regime. So throughout the Western United States, trends are showing that wildfire season is getting longer. In places like California, the mantra has actually become the fact that wildfire is basically year round at this point, and more it seems to feel that way, even trickling up here into southwestern Oregon. Additionally, wildfires are burning more severely, and the number of large fires is increasing. And in fact, to demonstrate that fact, there's a really neat graphic that Reuters just displayed really quick by a show of head nod. Can everyone see now a web page instead of that screen? Perfect, thanks, Jeff. So what you're seeing here is at the time in 1970, the largest block here shown is what was at the time the largest wildfire recorded in the country's history. But as this animation begins through time, what I hope to show you, if it runs, come on, little buddy, you can do it. Oh, here we go. So what you'll see is the 10 largest fires, their size is being displayed graphically here. And as we progress through time, you'll note that there are shuffling of what the 10 largest fires are. And as you'll move forward in time, you'll notice that the frequency at which these top 10 largest fires are occurring quickly expands as we move into what is now 2020, where we had 4 of the 10 largest fires in our country's history all within 1 year, which is pretty amazing and yet not surprising given the trends that climate change are taking. Just one quick, can you all see that slideshow again? Thank you. Wow, I love that that works like it's supposed to. It's a treat. Okay. So with this comes a competing factor that all of us are very familiar with, which is that Western development, we continue to expand into the Western United States. All of us are part of that. We all live in the Western United States, and as many, if not all of you are aware, all of Ashland is within a wildfire hazard zone. So we are expanding not only in the West, but in an area that is known to have a wildfire risk. And at the middle of that diagram is, oh, that means we have a bit of a problem here. We've got a wildfire prone landscape and we're choosing to build in it. So it's up to us as community members to prepare our landscapes and prepare our properties for fire, which is the majority of what I'll be talking to you about today. But a little bit of setting context as it relates to fires burning in what we call the wildland urban interface, which is where the built environment meets the wildfire prone forests that we live in, or rangelands, depending on what part of the West you're living in. So a show of hands or thumbs up on your Zoom screens. How many of you were around for the 2009 Siskiyou fire? Stu was, Vicki was, all right, a few of you were, I was not. That's a fire that burned off of Tolman Creek Road up in the hills. It burned about 190 acres, and I've spoken to several of those residents that were living on Tolman Creek at the time and still are, and what they recall is seeing the fire burning on the hillside, but what we really talk about in wildfire safety is then the embers started raining down on people's homes and having small ignitions occur outside of the main burn area. In 2010, we had the Oak Knoll fire. I'm assuming all the people that had their thumbs up for that 2009 fire would have theirs up for being here in 2010. That was a grass fire that jumped the interstate and ultimately burned 11 homes and damaged 2 others. And what you're seeing here is an image from how that fire was able to spread during the Oak Knoll fire, which was through vegetation that we people planted in our built environment. Another issue that caused that fire to spread was the Oak Knoll area at the time had a lot of wood shake roofs. Just about the worst thing you can do around your property is to have any roof structure that is composed of wood shakes. And that's because you've got the most flammable fuel, which is wood, being sun-baked year-round, and is now really susceptible to burning by either embers or direct flames. And of course, more recently, I'm presuming all of you were here on the day of the Alameda fire and the Oven Chain fire. And this is just a picture that if you've driven along the highway through Talent and Phoenix, you've seen this and know this history. You experienced it firsthand. We lost several thousand homes. Thousands of people have been displaced and may never be able to rebuild in the location that they lived and thrived in. And it's just a really challenging thing to deal with that we would like to avoid doing again, particularly here in Ashland, where we have a very similar built environment to what burned in Talent and Phoenix right along Bear Creek Parkway. We've still got a lot of ignitable material. So the way I think about and the way wildfire professionals think about how to prevent fires like the Alameda fire and the Oven Chain fire, you have to think about the wildfire cycle and what causes a wildfire to become what we call a WUI disaster, a wild and urban interface disaster, which goes through this cycle here that's displayed, which is that, like on the day of the Alameda fire, we had extreme fire conditions where we had hot, dry winds blowing in gusts above 50 miles an hour at times. And in the case of the day of the Alameda fire, we did have an ignition that led to rapid spread through that blowing wind and that low relative humidity that upon reaching homes began to ignite individual structures. Now, the tricky part about what causes a wildfire to become out of control, what we call an urban conflagration, where the fuel that's spreading the fire is homes, home-to-home wildfire spread rather than vegetation spread, is when multiple homes ignite and resources are unavailable in abundance to control those fires. And so we get overwhelmed resources spreading from fire to home, and we get what equates to that WUI disaster. So what we can do as individual homeowners, as property owners, in my case, as a renter, as a tenant, talking to my landlord, is figuring out ways to stop that cycle to cause WUI disasters by, oh, we got an alarm going, by stopping urban fires from igniting. And by that, I mean stopping multiple ignitions around homes, which then stops the cycle of causing homes to start being the fuel that spreads that fire. So we can stop this WUI disaster cycle. And what I'm going to be talking to you all about today is how you can do that around your individual home or landscape. Many of you have probably heard about this. It's called the home ignition zone, and it's a set of principles that guide you as homeowners and as property owners on how to best reduce the wildfire risk around your home. We think about the home ignition zone in 3 zones. So we have the 0 to 5 foot zone, the 5 to 30 foot zone, and the 30 to 100 foot zone. And when it comes to at the end of this presentation, I want all of you to hopefully be thinking about ways that you can reduce the wildfire risk around your own property. And what I'd highly encourage you to do as we go through this home ignition zones, these home ignition zone sections, is to start at your home and work your way out. So the first zone is our 0 to 5 foot zone. It's called the immediate zone. And first and foremost, this includes the structure itself, where you live and store all of your belongings. And there are several key components that you need to address in order to harden your home, particularly to embers that might be moving in front of a fire that might ultimately help ignite your property. A couple of those, one I've already mentioned, is make sure you have a rated roof, meaning you want a roof that has a high rating. The way roof structure works is you have Class A, Class B, and Class C roofing. Class C roofing is wood shake. You don't want that, and it's actually prohibited in the city of Ashland to be building any roof structures using wood shake. Thank goodness. Most people use like asphalt shingles or composite shingles, and both of those are considered Class A. So that's about as good as it can get. The best being having a metal roof. Another less commonly thought about item is screening. So the ventilation that allows your house to breathe, whether it's your attic, your basement, your crawl space, those are all openings that in the event of a fire, embers from a fire nearby that may not have reached your home yet or may never reach your home, the embers from that fire may fall upon your property. And what you want to do as a homeowner is harden your structure to anywhere that those embers could get in. And one of the top ways to protect your home is to screen off your vents to your attic, whether it's like your gable vents or those vents that are located underneath the eaves of your roof, or those that are ventilating your crawl space or basement. And the general rule is that you want to use at least 1/8 inch metal screening to vent off these areas. And that's because embers that are smaller than that get through, the fire science has shown that those don't really have the critical mass to ignite anything past that 1/8 inch metal screening. And another upgrade that tends to be a little bit more costly, but is worth considering, especially if you have wood shake siding, is replace your siding with fire resistant material. A common option in this day and age is fiber cement siding, commonly known as like hardy board. That's sort of like saying it's a Kleenex rather than a tissue, hardy board being the product. And what that is it's half wood pulp fiber and half cement. So that siding is still combustible. It can still smolder, but the ability of that fire to spread along that siding is much slower than if you had wood siding. And of course, non-combustible options are available as well, the most popular one being stucco. And demonstrating what this looks like in practice, I have a couple of photos from when we went and did post Alameda disaster assessments of structures in the Alameda fire. So what you're looking at here are a couple of photos from the Alameda fire aftermath. Vinyl siding is less popular in Ashland. I don't see it very often, but the implications of using it are apparent on this top left photo, where the radiant heat from trees that had burned just across this driveway were enough to meld to the vinyl, and any of the insulation behind it was all that was standing to protect that individual structure. And then at the bottom right, what you're seeing is on the ground surface, a lot of burning, or at that time it was extinguished, but burning bark mulch. And the only thing protecting the interior of that structure was the 1/8 inch metal screening. Actually, this was 16th inch metal screening that was protecting this crawl space. And you'll notice the siding above did smolder. That baseboard there, that was actual wood, and you can see a lot of that burned away. But just above that, that's actually hardy board siding. So that's just indicating that that material can still smolder and slowly spread fire throughout the home. And I actually have a backup photo later on to show you a little zoomed out there. Sorry, I'm getting a call. Let me ignore that. Okay. So thinking about the immediate zone, that first 5 feet also requires you to think about what's attached to your home and the landscaping that's close to your home structure. So some of the big items to think about when building your home or retrofitting your home to prepare for wildfire, think about enclosing your decks or porches with either metal screening or building those out of ignition resistant materials. A couple of popular options are metal, or Trex is another common option. We also suggest that you enclose those decks. The reason being that you don't want any leaf litter or needle litter accumulating underneath your deck. And if you're unable to easily rake out that material annually or blow it out with a leaf blower, you want to enclose that so that none of that flammable material is getting underneath your deck and then becomes a weak underbelly to your home if embers are able to get underneath that deck and then ignite that kindling that ultimately ignites your wooden deck. And then a really important one that I'll show a really good example photo in a moment is making sure that any fences that attach to your siding are composed of non-combustible material. In the city of Ashland, we actually have an ordinance that prohibits new installation of fences or retrofitting of fences for that first 5 feet to be constructed out of combustible material. So in ordinance, you are required for that first 5 feet of attachment moving forward to be composed of something that's non-flammable. And the proof is in the pudding on this one. So this is another example. This is actually the zoomed out version of that.
Sorry, we can see you're getting a call again.
Oh, thanks. That's actually to our front desk. I can't control that one.
Just let you know.
Thanks. So in this case, this is the zoomed out version of the photo that I showed last of that metal screening. Sorry, someone will pick up eventually. What we have here is the hardy board siding, which you can see that the ability of that material to spread fire was actually really limited. But the wood fence that was attached to it, you can see completely combusted, and in this case, fell away from the fencing. I really wish someone would pick up, sorry. Oh, sweet, someone did. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to talk over it because I'm used to doing that. So in this case, having non-combustible siding really helped, and just as an indicator of how important it is that fence attachments be made of something that's non-combustible. The photo on the right shows that embers that ultimately were able to land up against the siding of that home did not combust the siding that was made out of hardy board, but did ignite the wooden fence that was made out of combustible material. Let me see if there's anything I can do here. I'm just going to start hanging up on people. Sorry about that. It's going to keep ringing. Could you give me one moment, Margaret? I'm so sorry, Bridget.
Yeah, no problem.
I think, Bridget, now is when you're supposed to tell us a good joke.
Oh, I wasn't prepared for jokes. Do you have any jokes, Jeff?
No, I don't.
I don't know if I can come up with one on the fly like that.
Yeah. Sorry about that, everyone. We think there's actually something wrong. That's weird. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry, were you in the middle of questions or something? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, you're good.
Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so moving on to like what landscaping principles you can keep in mind. These are all pretty common. So within the first 5 feet of the home, you don't want to plant any flammable plants. The reason being your home tends to be pretty hardened and unable to ignite very easily by embers. But those flammable plants within the first 5 feet, just think of them as kindling. They're going to easily ignite and then be that kindling to ignite the bigger materials that build your home. Another common kindling that we really want to get rid of and that I talk to people almost every day about is bark mulch placed within the first 5 feet of your home structure, as well as sheds, as well as any bark mulch that's resting up against wood fence or your decks. That stuff is extremely flammable, is a really common thing that ignites first when embers begin falling on your property, and then ultimately kindles anything else that's going to burn around your house. And then another common one that we see in Ashland a lot is bark mulch. So you don't want any, any firewood. So you don't want any stacked firewood or other flammable material, whether it's like construction material that you've squirreled away, but you just need to get rid of it. And that's because that's more kindling as well. So just a couple of photo examples of the importance of that. What you'll notice in this photo, which is again on the left from the Alameda fire, if you look closely, you'll see that where there used to be structures standing, within 5 feet of a lot of those structures is vegetation that is still, it's not green, it's crispy, but it did not combust in a fire. But what's missing is the flammable plant material, common examples being like mugo pine, juniper, arborvitae. Those are completely gone. And so that vegetation is extremely flammable. So there are fire resistant alternatives. Those that are still green on the screen are an indicator of that, that are fire resistant options that we recommend that you use within the first 5 feet of your home instead. And then on the right, near the front of the screen or close to the camera was a mugo pine, and those things just flame up and then the fire moves along. So just another example of a plant not to use. Then we move out to the intermediate zone. So that's the area between 5 and 30 feet of your property. So the goal of the intermediate zone for you as someone managing your vegetation in this zone of your property is you want that landscaping to not be susceptible to burning at high intensity. So that means really limiting the amount of flammable plants that you have within the first 30 feet of your home. It also means that you want material that's not going to burn for a really long time. A lot of what we saw in the Alameda fire is that fire front moved past really quickly. But if any items were left there to smolder, even if a home survived that initial fire front moving through, things within the 5 to 30 foot zone, whether it was flammable plants or more bark mulch, it had the chance to smolder around and punk around the landscape until it reached something else that was flammable that eventually brought it to within that first 5 feet of the home. So you really want to nix any of that material within the first 30 feet that are going to burn long after you've evacuated and perhaps long after the fire front has passed. And then of course, you don't want any material that's going to make direct flame contact with your home. So if you have a lot of like young trees that have self-seeded that are, growing beneath that ponderosa pine where those seeds are sourced from, what you want to do is eliminate all that flammable vegetation to protect that large tree, because if that large tree ignited, the flames off of that individual tree would very likely be enough to reach to your home structure and ignite by flames directly. So a couple of quick examples of that. What we have is a photo on the left where even though the 5 to 30 foot zone was landscaped using rock as the ground mulch, there were still a selection of flammable plants planted in between that rock mulch that was still able to combust. And so thinking about what it takes to eliminate those flammable fuels is really important. And then the example on the right actually shows just how important it is to make sure that if you do have a wooden fence that leads right up to your home, make sure it's either composed out of non-combustible material, or if you have the opportunity before you evacuate, do what this homeowner did, which is to prop open that gate to stop the connection of flames from moving along that fence to your home. And in this case, the 5 to 30 foot zone of their neighbor burned that fence, but fortunately that neighbor had broken up the ability of wood to spread fire directly to the property. And then finally, with these last few minutes here, moving into the 30 to 100 foot zone. So that's what we call our extended zone. And depending on where you live in Ashland, you may not have this extended zone. The extended zone may be your neighbor. It's a really common theme in Ashland where you have less than 30 feet between you and your neighbor. And it could also be the opposite. I know a couple of people on this call who their extended zone actually goes far beyond the 100 feet of their home. They've got hundreds, if not thousands of feet between them and their neighbors. And so your extended zone may move further out. And the goal here in this extended landscaping area is to stop fire from spreading through the trees and dropping that fire to the ground. And there are a couple of common practices to do that. Which is one, to reduce the density of canopy on your property. So if you have a lot of trees where if you look up into the canopy, there's no spacing in between your trees, that's going to allow fire to spread from tree to tree to tree. And if you're able to start breaking that up, that fire is going to be forced to stop spreading through the canopy and drop to the ground. You also want to fight fire that's spreading from below, moving up into the canopy of those trees. And so you can reduce ladder fuels, those fuels that grow beneath those large trees that may carry flames up into the canopy. And to do that, you can also keep your surface fuel to a minimum. So if you have a lot of trees that are producing a lot of branches and needles, starting at the home, but working your way out, hopefully into the extended zone, raking up that material and breaking it up so that way fire can't spread all the way from the extended zone up against your home. And so a really good example of that is, again, from the Alameda fire. What we're looking at here is one of only 3 structures in the Bear Creek Estates mobile home park that survived. So this is actually the home that is the furthest east along that parkway. So the fire was spreading from the right of the photo towards the left. And the reason that this home survived is because its extended zone, which was actually out of the management of this homeowner, was an adjacent agricultural field that had been mowed and was actually pretty green still when the fire spread through it. So the extended zone there did not have any fuels that kept fire moving into the canopy. And so what you see is all of the trees, even the flammable tree right behind the property, none of those burned. And that's because there was no ability for fire to keep spreading through the canopy. And ultimately that home did survive. And with that, I think, Bridget, we had scheduled me to go until about now. Is that correct? And we can open it up for questions.
I don't know if you want to talk about the wildfire assessment portal.
Do we have the time? I'm happy to dip into it.
Okay, yeah, we'll see if there's any questions and then go from there. So yeah, does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Katie or myself?
I have a question.
Yeah, Jeff.
Katie, can you talk a little bit about the city and the fire department's policies or thinking on enforcement and tighter regulation?
In regards to?
People maintaining their properties.
Gotcha. For fire safety. Well, the city does have a wildfire safety ordinance, and I have some backup slides, so I'll just toss over to that one here. So we do have a couple of ordinance in place. The first being our weed abatement ordinance. So if you have tall, dry grass on your property, or if you have flammable weeds, the most common offender being Himalayan blackberry, there is an abatement deadline of June 15th every year. We push really strongly with our weed abatement coordinator for outreach and public education about that deadline. And ultimately, when we come up against that deadline, there's only a few like top offenders that we really need to go out and enforce the weed abatement issue. So that's been a really successful program over the year and gets at those fuels, particularly in the intermediate and extended zone. So how are we going to stop fire from spreading through the landscape? Additionally, we have a wildfire safety ordinance, which pertains mostly to new development and additions, which requires when you're adding onto your home around that new addition or around that new construction, you are required to create certain amounts of defensible space around those structures. So that includes not being allowed to plant certain prohibited flammable plants, of which the city has a list that when someone goes and gets a permit to do these new builds, they're given that information and know what not to plant. And also requires them to trim, limb up or trim trees that are nearby the roof line, and in some cases even remove some of those flammable trees. And so as far as enforcing that, we do our best to enforce it before that new construction takes place, which we have a lot of success in doing just because people are required to get a permit before they begin doing these things. But as far as challenges that we come across, a lot of times people are still building fences and they're doing it without a permit. Those fences are often made of wood because that's cheap and it looks really nice compared to other options out there. So there are still challenges out there and in terms of enforcing them. And a lot of them is when we don't have a permit to follow through on. So it is a challenge and something we're constantly just keeping our eye out for as we drive around the community. Yeah, Vicky.
I have two questions. One, you've mentioned the flammable plants. Is there a place we can see that list?
Yeah, if you all have access to the chat, I actually meant to add that in there as I talked, but was having a hard time. So you can also, if you just Google flammable plants Ashland, that's the first thing that pops up. So I'll add that link into the chat, but we'll also suggest that you give that a shot.
Okay. My other question was, maybe you were going to talk about this, the wildfire assessment. Is that where you can make an appointment for someone to come to your home and walk around and give you some advice?
Sorry, I missed the first half of that.
I'm wondering, you mentioned the wildfire assessment portal. Is that a place where you can make an appointment for someone to come out to your home and give you an assessment?
So the portal is where, so back in 2018 and 2019, a couple of fire department staff went not door to door, but went house to house and along the curb, did a rapid risk assessment of every property in Ashland. And so that portal provides that basic information about what we saw around your property. If you're interested in having someone come out to do a wildfire risk assessment, you can call the fire department at any time to do that. Currently, I'm the only person that's staffed to do that work. And this time of year, we start to get a few. So I'm scheduling a few weeks out in advance at this point. But you're welcome to reach out to me or the fire department. But moving forward, we're actually working on developing a volunteer-driven wildfire risk assessment program where we're going to be training volunteers really rigorously to be able to go out and do those assessments on my behalf, basically. Because what the social science has shown is that the best way to get people to take action is to do that one-on-one interaction. And right now we rely on this program to be something where someone calls the fire department and reaches out and says, I want this assessment. But moving forward, we'd love to be able to advertise that, like a fleet of volunteers, we can advertise that they're able to go out and do those assessments for us instead. And we would get a lot of traction doing that. In fact, if any of you is interested in volunteering to be one of those people, during the wildfire forum that many of you may have listened in on last week, we plugged that program for the very first time. So if anyone is interested in signing up, I can add a link onto this webpage for you all to sign up too.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we have one, Claudette, if that's how you say your name.
Yes. I live in Verde Village 2, it's a fairly new development. Our fences apparently did not, the development was able to not comply with that particular because of the timing of the development was before that code. But our main concern is we border onto Ashland Creek. And we also border onto a very large plot that's next to the dog park, which is it's Himalayan blackberry and other plants, and it's very dry. And so we've sent letters to the city and everyone about this and wonder if there are plans.
Yep, there are. Yeah, there
area.
are. So the city actually, shortly after the Alameda fire, probably in November, started gathering an interdepartmental vegetation management team. So we've got representatives from the fire department, Parks and Rec, Public Works, and we did a huge mapping exercise where we identified areas managed by the city that needed fuels reduction work to be done, and prioritize 3 zones, one of which is around your area. So that's something that if you didn't listen in on the wildfire forum last week, I would highly recommend that you go through that presentation, because they talk very specifically about your zone of the of town as getting work done. So we're prioritizing as much as work as we can get done this spring. So just know that we are thinking about it, that those letters did ultimately do the job that they needed to.
Right. Oh, how do I access last week's presentation?
Yeah, let me, that video was just posted to a couple of places. Let me send you that link. It might just be just a minute, but I'll post it in the chat.
Cool. Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Lori?
Yeah, thank you. This is so great, Katie. And I thought you did such an awesome job too on the wildfire forum. So I'm excited to tell more people about that, to get them to listen to that. It's really, really great. So I guess I have two questions. Is there a deadline for people to sign up for the volunteer program? And I think that's just such an awesome idea, since there's only one of you. If we can, replicate, additional Katies around town, that would be really great. Yes.
Oh, I want so many of me.
We do.
Are better than me.
We do too. We do too. Is there a deadline that you're envisioning that you want people to apply for that program?
At this point, we don't have a hard deadline, but for the sake of you all, if you all are interested as listeners in applying, the sooner the better. So let's just say April 1st, if you can enter that pre-application, which I just plopped the link in there. Hopefully that one works. Talking and typing is hard for me. So I would say earlier the better. The goal of this class or this program is to begin instruction sometime in either mid to late April, perhaps as late as early May. But we recognize that this program is going to take a lot of training, and we know that not everyone is going to be available to sit in on a class that lasts 2 or 3 hours over the course of several weeks, which if you look on that website, there's some information about estimates of time that you'll need to be spending doing this as a volunteer. But we plan on recording all of these trainings as well. That way that cohort of volunteers that we do gather together would be able to do learning on their own time. So we're trying to be as flexible with you all interested in volunteering as possible.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And then my second question is, I feel like there's this major collision between these landscaping guidelines and what people are actually doing out there. Like the bark mulch is, everybody is using that. And, and just in the last few weeks, as people are starting to do their spring work, you just see this massive amount of bark mulch purchasing. So I wondered if there's ways, or if you've engaged with any of the stores that sell that, or I actually was imagining a debate between the fire people and the landscaping people, help us know what to, mulching is kind of a big concept here in this part of the world, in part to keep, the weeds down and also to keep moisture in a little bit, I think is one of the other functions of mulching. So is there a concept of what is the best thing for people to do that everybody can agree upon?
Yeah, and so looping back to your first question, as far as engagement with those groups that are installing that bark material, it's something that's been recurring, but hasn't been a huge push all at once to get all of those either sellers or distributors on board with what's happening in Ashland and really what should be happening throughout the Rogue Valley. So oftentimes, so one of the ordinance requirements for new construction is that bark mulch is prohibited to be planted within the first 5 feet of any new construction. But we will still get people placing that mulch during that new construction, even though it's prohibited. And so in those cases, we reach out to the distributor and let them know, hey, we had this happen. The contractor that's building the home is raking it away right now and removing it. But just as a heads up, this is required within Ashland. But, ultimately it comes down to the buyer, the homeowner, to know that information as well, because those distributors are selling a product. And it's the responsibility of the homeowner to ultimately know what the requirements are when they're building that property. And that's something that hasn't trickled through everyone's heads yet. But just as a more general way of thinking, bark mulch in general, particularly within the first 5 feet of your home, regardless of circumstance, should never be installed. So whether it's a new build or it's you replacing that mulch that has decomposed over the last decade, we do recommend that, if you don't use bark mulch, use something that's non-combustible in its place. And there is an ongoing understandable debate that equates to a lot of added heat against the side of the home. It's not the same as installing bark mulch in its place, but that first 5 feet where you do see embers landing in that bark mulch and igniting everything that bark mulch touches, there is a reason not to install it within those first 5 feet. They produce a lot of embers themselves that carry that fire forward further.
Katie, could you maybe make a brief pitch for the Firewise program and give us an update on the overall status in Ashland?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the city of Ashland, we actually have the most Firewise communities within a single town, more than any other city in the country. So we have 35 Firewise communities in the city of Ashland. That being said, we've sort of capped out in the number of Firewise communities that we can manage and provide that level of attention to. And so what we're shifting more towards, and something that I've gotten a lot of really awesome requests for since the Alameda fire, is neighborhoods wanting me to go through and just provide a general Firewise type assessment of that individual neighborhood, and to have me provide recommendations on how you can reduce the risk around your neighborhood, which is exactly what the Firewise program does. That's sort of like the crux of, once we have those recommendations, those communities can go forth and succeed, whether it's through grant dollars that our Firewise communities get, or through a multitude of other opportunities that are available either now or in the future in our city. So I highly recommend that as a neighborhood, you gather together to work on reducing your risk together, because that's what makes the Firewise Communities program successful, so successful in Ashland. And most recently, our Firewise communities, without me helping them at all, I told them, hey, everyone apply for this grant. And 13 of our 36 or 35 Firewise communities got a small grant to do some more fuels reduction work. So we're just really excited about how motivated those neighborhoods are, and know that there's a lot more motivation out there in the community.
Yeah, Linda?
Yeah. Could you put up a link to the green debris bin grant program where neighborhoods can apply to get a big green debris bin to put their whole neighborhood stuff in there?
Yes, absolutely. I'm plopping that into the chat right now. Thanks for asking about that. So very similar to the Firewise program, as far as like what makes it awesome, this green debris bin opportunity is an opportunity for you as a neighborhood, or for you as a neighbor, to gather together your neighborhood to get everyone to remove green debris that is flammable around your property, with emphasis around the first 5 feet of your home, but anywhere where you can get that debris removed, and get one of these green debris bins. And we're going to be placing these around the community between mid-April and end of May. And if you receive one of these bins, I'll be working with you very closely on when that bin is dropped off, when it gets picked up. So I encourage you to apply, but before you do, make sure you read through that application, because there's a few stipulations that'll help you out. So here, that is in the chat too. And one more green debris opportunity that, if you've been in Ashland for the last few years, we're actually coming up on our 10th annual green debris drop-off day, which is May 2nd. And that's going to take place at the transfer station up Valley View Road. And that's an opportunity for every resident in Ashland to take their green debris and drop that off at no cost to the transfer station. So normally there's somewhere between like a $16 to $18 cost per cubic yard to remove that material, but Recology is extremely awesome to work with, and once a year they open that up to collaborate with the fire department to help you get rid of your green debris. And I'm going to post a link to that on there too.
And also, after this event, I'm going to send out an email with all of these links, so everyone can reference them at a later time.
Thank you so much, Bridget. And what I'm going to do as well is all of these links. So I'm overwhelming you with links right now, but they're all in one place actually. So I've divvied them up separately, but there's a website called fireadaptedashland.org and then /wildfire prep. I'll type it for you in a minute, but all of these links are in one place.
Yeah, we have another question.
I don't have a question. I just want to share with the rest of the people on the call here that our Verde Village 2, we have adopted the greenway that starts at West Nevada Street and goes to the dog park. And Suleiman at the Recreation Department, I believe, we've been working with him and on our cleanup days. We have three a year, and he takes all the green debris away. So we create it all, throw it on the greenway and path, and he takes it away. And it's been really a wonderful cooperative effort. We're very proud of that.
Nice. Yeah, there are a lot of neighborhoods, whether it's an HOA or a less organized neighborhood, that do that. They'll chip in for a green debris bin that they actually have sitting out in a designated area either most of the year or year round. And it's a constant feed. You can constantly feed stuff in, but we recognize that that's not happening everywhere, which is why we're really excited about this this green debris bin opportunity. And you'll notice on that application at the bottom, it says that if you have any questions, reach out to, I think it's wildfire@ashland.or.us, and that's me. So if you have any questions, you're emailing me to ask for help. So happy to do that.
Great. All right, well, I think we can wrap it up unless anyone has any final questions or comments. Linda?
I just want to say how wonderful your presentations always are, Katie.
Oh,
And we couldn't make this town as safe without you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, we're the wildfire division. We're 3 people, but we say we're 3 people strong. So, and we get a lot of work done through the support of folks like you listening in the call. So right back at you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Awesome.
Actually, I do have one more question, and it has to do with our fencing in our Verde Village is all wood and along the greenway. And we've been talking about stopgap kind of or immediate things that we could do. Someone just suggested there is a spray a fire resistant spray that you can put on wooden fencing that would, because I mean, it's going to start up very soon and not all of us can replace our fences. We're not just going to do that. So
Right.
What do you think about that spray, that fire preventive spray?
That's a super good question. And it's amazing how like the word on these sprays are literally spreading like wildfire. I did not have a single one of these conversations last year. And I think I've talked to like 60 people this year about a couple of applicant options. So one really popular one that I'm a little more confident in is called intumescent paint. And what that does is provide a fire resistant barrier between wood and the paint that you apply over it. But those are pigmented, so they're not clear coats. And those do provide a little bit of a stopgap. But you don't want to be applying that stuff all over your entire fence line. And it's because that stuff is only, a protective barrier that has a time limit and is going to age over time. Where I'd prioritize doing that is if those wood attachments of the fence are right up against your home, pay special attention to treating that first 5 feet of attachment, because for a couple of reasons. One, there's a very high chance that in one spot of that fence, you're going to apply that paint inadequately to the point that it's able to combust and will then become a problem anyway. But if you're really paying attention to that first 5 feet around the home, that's where as the fire moves along that fence, you want to protect your structure. And so that first 5 feet is going to be the most important place to apply that material. But just keep in mind that is sort of like a last resort scenario. You want to focus on installing something that's non-combustible in the first place. So then circling back to that clear coat that you asked about, there are some options out there. Most of them that I've seen are actually for interior purposes only. So as soon as you are out in the open in the weatherized condition, you know, freezing and thawing in the winter months, I haven't seen any products that give me faith in those clear coats yet, but that's my sort of like personal sentiment. I haven't dug too deep into the studies on that myself.
And it was called intumescent.
Oh yeah, let me spell it for you. It's a doozy.
And it's pigmented, meaning, you know, it's going to have a color. It's going to have a pigment.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
But what I would recommend for all the fences that you already have out there is you don't want anything combustible to be sitting up against them. So that's going to start with your mulch, whether it's the big chunky bark mulch or even that finer material that usually has a bit of soil component in it. That stuff's going to smolder anyway, and it's going to smolder until it heats up that fence to the point of ignition. So really focusing on raking and pulling away any of that flammable material from your fences is extremely important.
Yep, we're on it.
I appreciate it. And I've spelled it for you there. Intumescent. I don't even know if I ended up spelling it right.
Is it
Oh, I did. Yep.
All right.
Any other final questions?
All right. Yeah, it looks like no more questions or comments. So I also want to be sensitive to everyone's time. So I think we'll call. Oh, Jeff. Oh, you're waving. I thought you were raising your hand to ask a question. Yeah. So thank you, Katie, so much for presenting. That was so awesome and such good information. And thank you all for showing up and dedicating an hour of your time to spend with us. So I'll send up a follow-up email with the resources and links and Katie's contact information and all of that. So yeah, thank you everyone. Have a good
Awesome.
rest of your day.
Thanks everyone for attending. It was good to see everyone.